This is Angel Bono, just a servant. I've been working in my relationship with God for another week, and I hope you've been working in your own relationship with God as well. And now I just want to help one more soul, and I encourage you as well to try to help someone else out there that you could help, because you are an apostle. We all apostles working in the same battle. I had planned something for this podcast, but a couple days ago, I had a conversation with a priest friend of mine, and he raised a very interesting conversation. He works in a school, and he said to me, how can we get our students in his school, my school, to grow up and grow in faith, thinking or knowing that that the life of faith will actually bring them joy instead of the life of the world. Because it's true, like for all these teenagers out there that are trying to get closer to God, but they keep receiving the influence of the society that basically is about alcohol, sex, and drugs. And he's telling them that they will be joyful that way. All these things, put in the right context, are good things because God created them. But the problem is today in society, they've been taken completely out of the context in which they should be. So it is very hard to convince a student or a kid, a teenager, that actually if he follows the way of God, he will receive all the joy that he is looking for, that he will find his place in the world instead of looking for that world that will not bring any joy. Because even though the world in itself is good, the trends of today are changing it completely. So the joy that these three things bring is only apparent. It's only a partial joy that doesn't really go in depth into our souls. At the end of the day, it's shallow. Why? Because they're out of context. If they were put in context, they were actually, and they done well, they actually do bring joy, because they do bring joy in marriage. They do bring joy, like having a drink with a good friend of yours with moderation and in a virtuous way is beautiful. Drugs, there's not really a way to to deal with them, and they always go against the fifth commandment because they affect our perception of reality, which is basically wrong according to our fifth commandment. And the same with sexuality in the right context of marriage, it is beautiful. Is the creation of God, is actually the way in which the human being participates in the creation, because we get to create life with God. So we create the material part of the person, and then God infuses the soul. So it's a perfect union between man and God. It is beautiful. At the end of the day, all these things out of context, the way society wants our children to deal with them, it's basically like a very poor family that barely can eat anything, but at the front of the house, they have parked a beautiful Mercedes. And that's the way they picture these things. They get them completely out of context, and they show you an amazing Mercedes, an amazing car that will make you joyful. But it's a car that will not start. It's a car that doesn't work. It's a car that as soon as you sit on it, you realize that it's a fake car. Joy is self-given. We know that the more we give, the more we feel realized. Instead, this joy these things bring is a self-centered joy that, as I said before, goes away. It only moves you. It doesn't move anybody else because it's a selfish way of living. Joy is supposed to lift you up, bring you up to God. But this one initially seems to lift you up, but then it drops you and lets you go hurt. Alcohol and drugs, when they're abused, they might give that sense of joy, but as soon as the effects go away, you actually feel destroyed. There is no place to experience the happiness of emptying yourself of yourself and really be open to a full life full of joy. Sex as well, when it is misused, is completely the opposite of self-giving. That is God's creation, to give yourself completely, to really unload everything that God has given you into the one person that God has planned for you. But the problem is, as soon as it is taken out of the context of marriage, all that is supposed to be a gift of self becomes selfishness. There is not an option in which you can say, out of the context of marriage, I can be intimate with somebody and actually care about the intentions of the other person. Apparently, you might think so, but ultimately, if you really care about the other person, what is really tough is to wait. What is really hard is to focus on the person and not on the body. Because at the end of the day, that is what the dating time is for, is to get to know the person, because it's with that person with which you're going to spend, if you get married, the rest of your life. The body is a side topic that comes into place after you've got married. Basically, society promises that if you indulge yourself, if you give yourself everything that you want, you will be happy. But we don't need examples of people who have indulged themselves, but they actually are empty. I don't know if you remember the movie of the Pirates of the Caribbean, in the first one with Captain Barbossa, when they were looking for the treasures of the world and they found this treasure and they took it, and then a curse came to them, right? And I don't remember if you remember the scene in which they're in the boat after they kidnapped the girl, and there is a moment that he says, I can have everything I want, but I am empty. Also, another good example, I don't know if you've watched the movie All the Money in the World. It's a true story, and it reflects very well how this man, that at some point he had all the money in the world. So he was the richest man on earth, but he was so empty. He was full of himself, but so empty, to the point, actually, I'm going to stop there. I don't want to spoil the movie, but I encourage you to watch it and to see how the more he had, the less he actually was. In the end, these three things can become addictions because they delete everybody else from our world. When we overuse alcohol, when we use drugs, when we take sex out of the marital context, we actually making ourselves our own world. We're looking after ourselves alone. We don't care about anybody else. When these life pleasures are self-centered, they'll give you a sense of joy, temporary, as I said before, but they're like jumping without a parachute. You think you're going to have the most beautiful time, the most beautiful views. Like I personally, before we got married, my wife wouldn't do this now. She doesn't let me jump off a plane again. She gifted me parachuting for my birthday, and it was beautiful. It's one of the most amazing experiences in my life. But just imagine jumping, enjoying it, and by the time you want to say, okay, well, that's enough, you can't stop. That is what happens ultimately. So we need that order of things. We need that parachute in order to enjoy skydiving. With the same, we need to put order into alcohol and sex. The same drugs, I'm going to take them out of the equation because there is no way that drugs can actually benefit you health-wise or spiritually. So, yeah, so when we have them in context, they make sense and they make the person rejoice. Also, there's times that our teenagers or even ourselves have gone that way. But I can tell you, no matter how hard you have fallen, there is never a point of no return. There is always a way to come back. It is always possible to turn your life around and be truly happy. It doesn't matter what others do. We need to own our own decisions. I can say that I'm a witness of what I'm speaking about today. And I can tell you it is possible. I can say now that I've got a beautiful family and I am truly joyful because I have the most important things in my life around me. First of all, God. And second, my wife and my children. It doesn't matter where they are, but I know that I am loved and I love the same way that God loved his church. Also, there's a point in which these students or children of ours, even though they know what is right and what is wrong, they still choose to go that path. And they say that they want to try, they want to experience, that they need to know what it is. But at the end of the day, at what price? Because it's true, you can turn your life around. It will be time wasted. It's time that you can really be focused on what you are meant to do. All of us need to make a commitment of forgetting about ourselves. I talked about time the other day, how the more we give it away, the more we feel that we have. And the same with all these promises that society does. So the more we grab them, the less we actually experience them. Just remember scripture, the last will be first. Those that serve will be served. So we need to renew this commitment over and over every day to do what is right. Because the most self-giving people in history were not focused on themselves. They were actually the ones that gave it all for others. Just think of Mother Teresa. She was amazing. And she didn't have anything. Everything she had, she gave it to the poor, to the ones that thought like her and the ones that didn't think like her at all. Now, I encourage you to ask yourself from the heart, ask yourself, am I happy? Am I happy with everything in my life? Some things can be changed, but other things need to remain and we need to work on them and continue working on them because they're forever. For example, marriage. For example, certain vocations, priesthood. But apart from these two things, everything is changeable. We can change jobs. We can change lifestyle. We can change friendships. We can change everything if those things don't bring us to God. Yeah, of course, they're fun. Of course, they bring that temporary joy. But at what price? Just remember the effect all these things have in your soul. The more you experience it, the further away you actually are from what you're looking for. Look into your heart. Ask yourself, am I truly happy? And after you've thought about it, you've examined yourself, make the changes. Look to give, not to receive. Because I can tell you that when you give, you will receive. Society pictures sin as something attractive, like a delicious summer fruit. The other day, there was an apple here in my house. There was a bit of it was a bit rotten. So I cut it off and then I bit into the apple and the whole apple tasted rotten. And that is that summer fruit that is seen in society. It seems attractive, but as soon as you bite into it, you'll realize that it's rotten. We need to teach and be witnesses of this joy. So there is no way we can teach our children or our students or our friends that faith is the real way towards joy, that spiritual growth is the only thing that will fulfill us, unless we are witnesses at all time, unless we show virtue. I always talk about the importance of smiling. It is so important that we share our smile. The smile is a mirror of the soul with the eyes. The way you look at people, the way you try to understand them, how you share cheerfulness, how you teach them through positivity instead of through anger. We need to make people wonder why you show real happiness. You need to make people want to be like you, because you that practice your faith have a treasure. You are blessed, and that need to be shared. That is what you need to show everybody else. Because at the end of the day, if we don't teach through virtue and joy, if we don't spread that joy that we are meant to have inside, independently of our circumstances, independently of how much suffering we have in our lives, we need to share that joy, because that is truly what our Lord is putting our soul through faith. And it is when we teach this way, with positivity, with a smile, with cheerfulness, those people that we're trying to teach, that we're trying to model, they will want to be around us. In the opposite side, if we don't, why would they listen to us when we're trying to tell them that it is not good to abuse alcohol, that it is better if they keep sex until marriage, that the use of drugs will ruin the brain and their lives? Or we are positive, or we have lost the battle. It will not be their fault. It will be our lack of joy. Joy is not having the whole world and possessing it and having everything in the world. Is having the beauty, the way God created the world, to have that world and giving it away, to empty ourselves from everything worldly, to really fill ourselves with the real world that God gifted us, that is beautiful, that is the most amazing creation of God. Remember, God created the world and he saw that it was good, good with capital. I was saying to a student of mine the other day that I don't need to tell him not to put his fingers in a PowerPoint for him to know that that will be bad. He does trust me. Whether you are the teacher, you are the student, you didn't need proof. So many times the people we talk to say that they need proof, that way they will not find joy. But I can tell you, you didn't need to put your fingers in a PowerPoint to know that you shouldn't do that, that you can get killed. You're trusted. I can tell you, if we teach through positivity, if we share joy in everything that we do, people will take our advice. People will believe us when we say that certain things need to be ordered in a certain way, just as they believe us when we tell them that there is electricity in a PowerPoint. I want to finish saying that we need to be witnesses of God's love. That love that changed the world. That love that Jesus had, with which he changed everybody that came across to him. That love that St. Paul described. We need to be compassionate. We need to be patient. We need to be able to forgive, because our Lord told us, they will know that you're my disciples, seeing the love that you have for one another. So if we are like that, if we're positive, if we're filled with joy, we'll be able to love for real, and we will be able to have an impact in everybody around us, especially those closer to us. So if you want to let people know that faith is the only source of joy, the real source of joy, the one that will last forever, be loving. Love the same way that Jesus loved. He died on the cross. He gave his life for us. So give your life for others, and you will have that impact that we're looking for. You will be changing the world. This is Angel Bueno from One Soul. It's given me great joy talking to you today, and I look forward to seeing you next week.